Let's see, dark brown or black shoulder-length hair, medium build, dark eyes, mid to late 30s, 5'4" to 5'8" in height, I thought to myself as I filled out the questionnaire. A good sense of humor is a must, and intelligence is unquestionable. I laughed to myself at the pun I had just made. Must be proficient in a second language, preferably Spanish or Japanese, and a love of children was an important requirement. I looked over my answers to the application form and tweaked a few of them before hitting the submit button. I also wrote a short paragraph about who I was, without naming names, and why I was doing this. I wasn't expecting to see a runway model, not at all. I was looking for a normal woman who was happy with me and my lifestyle, which included my 2 children. You see, I liked feeling in love and really liked being married, just not to the woman I was married to now. Confused? You wouldn't be confused if you were married to Heather. We've been married for 8 years and have no intention of entering our 9th. In retrospect, I probably shouldn't have married her. But heck, we had the same arguments even before we bonded, even though I thought she would eventually grow up and change. To my dismay, she never changed. Even after having 2 children and countless fights, she didn't see anything wrong with what she was doing. Heather would just say she was like that, with a light-hearted tone in her voice, and leave it at that. But not this time. She'd crossed the line too many times, and I'd had enough. We didn't get married after high school or even college. I wanted to go into business. I wanted to have a stable life before settling down. My 2 best friends in the world and I went into business together and spent 6 miserable years building our advertising business. We weren't huge, but we had a good client base and we grew every year. I had met Heather at a friend's party 2 years earlier when our business was in its 4th year and slowly but surely growing. She was blonde, tall, and very pretty. I'm not a troll, but I also don't have the looks that make women swoon. I think I look a little better than average, and if you didn't like me, well, that's your loss. I remember in college I once asked the most beautiful girl I'd ever seen to dance. I was a freshman, and 2 of my buddies dared me to ask her. She turned down 99% of the guys who asked her to dance and was just standing there with her group of friends, looking beautiful, when I approached her. "Do you want to dance?" I asked, knowing full well what she was going to say. She gave me a saintly look and said no better. "Thank God," I said loud enough for everyone to hear. "For a moment I thought you were going to say yes, and then I'd have to dance with you. I only asked you to be polite, because an arrogant, self-centered cunt like you probably doesn't dance often with her head shoved so far up her ass, but I decided to ask you anyway. But if you'll excuse me, I still need to take a piss," I said, stepping away from her and her stunned group. A few people started giggling. As you can see, I have no problem calling a spade a spade. I've never done that before, that is, until I met Heather. I guess I didn't notice what she was really like. And getting back to Heather, I will say that for some reason she decided to go out with me when I asked her to. I wasn't quite sure why, but I was happy nonetheless. I was always busy, so we didn't go out much. Plus, her dance card was often full. She was always friendly when we ran into each other, and after our 5th year, things got better, and my thoughts turned to women again. I had a few bucks in my pocket, and for the first time in a long time, I could show a woman a better time than just going to a movie and pizza afterwards. "Steve, what's up? Still burning the midnight oil?" greeted Heather, catching up with me at the mall. "There's still work to do, but we're starting to see the light at the end of the tunnel. How are you doing?" "Are you still working at that accounting firm?" 4 years next week," she said proudly. "Would you like to grab a bite to eat and catch up sometime?" "Sure, that would be great." "Why don't I look at my schedule and give you a call?" I told her, surprised as hell. "Great, I look forward to your call soon." She even smiled broadly. "Well, I should get going. I have an appointment with my hairdresser, and I don't want to be late." She waved goodbye and was gone in less than 2 minutes. I won't bore you with the details of my subsequent dates and feeble attempts to woo Heather. I'll just say that I tried my best and had some success. Oh, okay. For myself, I was in 7th heaven. We dated sporadically for 6 months when we decided to become exclusive. We had accomplished a lot physically, but she said she wasn't going to go all the way with me until she was ready. It was the 4th month of our exclusive relationship, and I decided to go all out. On Saturday, I took her to a fancy restaurant, took her for a carriage ride around the lake, and finally went to a nice dance club. It wasn't the kind of club where all the teenagers congregate, but a more mature and upscale club. It was crowded, and there was no way I could catch the waitress's eye. Sidet, why don't I sneak over to the bar and get us something to drink? I'll be right back. I turned around and started making my way through the crowd. It took me all of 10 minutes, but when I got back to our table, I noticed she wasn't there. Maybe she went to the ladies' room, I thought as I sat down and waited for her. At 5 feet 8 inches tall and a full head of blonde hair, she wasn't hard to spot, especially on the dance floor. I couldn't believe my eyes and stood up so I could see better. Yes, it was Heather with some very tall guy. They were dancing to a salsa-style song and she looked beautiful, but too close to him for my comfort. When the dance ended and the slow song started, I figured she'd go back to the table, but when they pressed up against each other, my stomach churned. It had taken me 3 months to get that close to her. If the music hadn't stopped, I'd be ready to walk over and stop her myself by now. She came back to our table with a wide smile on her face. "You're back," she said, picking up her margarita. "It's hot outside." She fanned herself with one hand while sipping her drink with the other. "I needed this," she said, finally putting the glass down. When another guy came up and asked her to dance, she was about to get up and leave with him when I spoke up. "If you ditch me again and dance with him, you'll find your own way home tonight." "Steve, it's just a dance." "And we're just on a date too, I suppose." "Steve, you said yourself you don't like to dance, but you know how much I love to dance," she said as she stood up. "It's just one dance, and I'll be back in 5 minutes." When she took 2 steps away from the table, I stood up. I sipped my drink, turned around, and started to walk away. I heard people calling my name, and when I reached the door, I knew she was coming right behind me. I gave the valet my ticket and waited. "Steve, what the hell are you doing?" "Leaving. What does it look like I'm doing?" "You were just going to leave me here without saying a word?" "Heather, I told you that if you left me one more time, I would leave and you still left with that guy." "Steve, it was just a dance. What's the big deal?" "Seems like nothing much since you're so worried," I said as my car pulled up. "Steve, hold on. I'll get my purse and wrap up." "I have a better idea. Why don't you stay and dance with every Tom, Dick, and Harry? That way you won't have to worry about me being bored while you're on the dance floor." I got in the car. "Don't call me! I'll call you!" I shouted through the window to a now pissed-off Heather. I pulled away, feeling like Paul Newman in Cool Hand Luke. "We have a failure to communicate here." I remember him saying it out the window before he was shot. And Heather and I had exactly that. She never called me, and I never called her. I was seeing other people, and though I missed her like hell, I wasn't going to be taken advantage of or neglected. If she asked me first, I probably wouldn't mind her dancing a couple fast songs with someone else, but never, I repeat, never a slow song. There was no way in the world I would let anyone that close to my supposed girlfriend. Sandy and I were having dinner at Tony's restaurant. It was our second date when I heard a familiar voice behind me. I didn't even have to turn around to realize who it was. "Good evening, Heather," I said, without even looking at her. By then, she had already retreated to our table with her beau. "How are you?" "Just fine. Now I'm no longer with an insecure man." "I'm glad to hear that. But excuse my manners, Heather. This is Sandy. Sandy, this is Heather, the girl I used to date." "Steve, we didn't just date." "That's right. Dated until you let your looks and ego get the best of you. But that's all behind you now, isn't it? Care to introduce us to your man of the night? Unless you plan on dumping him for someone better later," I said sarcastically. "Screw you, Steve." "Right. We never got to that point, did we? Can't say I'm sorry, though. You must have had 10 guys after me, and I'm sure they don't make a thick enough rubber to protect me from what you could have had." I smiled at her. With those words, she turned away and walked away. Her friend rushed out running, trying to catch up with her. What the hell was that? Asked Sandy. Remind me not to pounce on you. What the hell did she do? I don't want to talk about it, and besides, it's in the past. Bullshit. Steve, it's obvious to anyone by the way you two were pouncing on each other that you both don't like each other, except for the two of you. After that, the night went downhill. After dinner, we made out on her couch for a while, but Mr. Lucky wasn't cooperating and my brain was throwing out millions of data points that I had to process. Steve, when you're done with her, maybe we can try again, or not. I'm not used to playing second fiddle, and I don't like it. She was right. Apparently, there was something else about her. I muttered something about calling her, but we both knew that wasn't going to happen. I got another kiss and drove my car off to nowhere. The next week and a half was rough. We were late on 2 projects, and 3 more were on the line. When Ken told me to get my head and ass in a pile, I knew what he meant. I can't get Heather out of my head. Steve, call her. Have some wine, have lunch, and come back tomorrow with a clear head. I need you 100% so we can finish the rest of the projects on time. So if it's not too much of a stretch, can we please get back to work? Ken and Andy, my other partner, were easy to talk to. They both had fiancés who loved them to death and more than understood that they were working 24/7 to finish a project. Heather, on the other hand, did nothing but swear that she wasn't the center of my or anyone else's universe. But Sandy was right. I still had feelings for her. I didn't bother to call and sent her an email. I asked if she was busy on Saturday and told her I wanted to talk. When she replied and asked if it was included in the dinner, I realized she would be there with or without food. I was relieved, and so were Ken and Andy when I finished my project and helped them both complete theirs. You see, we were equal partners, and when we drafted the articles of incorporation, we made them very rigid. Thus, neither of us could sell our share without the approval of the other two. In all cases, it was the majority that decided. We each had our own specialty. Ken was a terrific salesman, and Andy was a phenomenal graphic designer. I could come up with slogans and run the whole project together, including making sure we made money. We were a good team. Steve, what the hell are we doing here? Asked Heather when we were done with the order. You know, just 2 old friends having a nice dinner together, that's all. Yeah, sure. And what's with the email? Were you afraid to call? Afraid I'd say no and hurt your little ego again? With those words, I stood up. You're probably right. I was stupid to think you'd changed. I put the napkin back on the table and got up to leave. You'll always be a self-centered bitch. You'll never think about anyone but yourself. Sit down. It was a stupid joke, for heaven's sake. Can't a girl make a little joke to melt the ice? If it was a joke, it wasn't funny. And before we melt the ice, I need to clear something up. Can we at least wait until after dinner while you lay out your terms? I'm more than hungry, and if this gets too crazy, I don't want to miss what should be a great dinner. Why don't we have a few drinks, eat dinner in silence, and then beat the crap out of each other? This was said with a smile that could melt the coldest heart. Okay, truce until dessert. Who said I'm giving you dessert? You might get a kiss, but I didn't say anything about dessert, she said, taking a sip of wine. That weekend, we resolved most of our differences. We set boundaries for each of us and worked out safe words to say when one or the other crosses the line. More than once, I received a call or email from Heather with just one word, chocolate. We both knew what it meant. I gotta go, guys. See you in the morning. Steve, where the hell are you going? We can finish Carter's plan by 9 if we work together, Ken said to me and Andy. Andy looked beat up, and I was only running on 4 cylinders. Heather is expecting me for dinner, and I'd rather see her face than yours over a cold slice of pizza any day, I said as I put on my coat. Besides, she's got a much better body than you, and I'm hoping to get some before I'm too exhausted to pick it up. We were already together, and 2 months later she moved in with me. I was still working like a savage, but I decided I was building a future for the two of us. It would all be worth it in the end. When I showed Andy and Ken the ring I planned to give Heather, they freaked out. Look, I have nothing against Heather, and I know you love her to death. But have you thought about what happens if it doesn't work out? I threw him a disapproving look. Steve, just hear me out. If you marry her and it doesn't work out, she can have half of what you own, including the business. We've worked too hard for some ex to come along and start making trouble. All I'm saying is talk to our attorney and get his opinion on this. And if you agree with what he says, proceed with our mutual blessing. You guys need to take more walks. You're working too hard. Now that you mention it, what are you going to do about Anne and Linda? Have you discussed a prenup with them? They both said that their fiancés were fine with it and that if I didn't believe them, I could ask. Guys, this is so impersonal and I know it's going to cause an argument. Steve, wouldn't it be better to tell her everything now before you ask her? If you do it later, she'll probably think you're hesitating. Get her to agree to it now, then ask her later. That way you'll be protected and the issue won't have to come up again. You'll sleep much better knowing you're covered, Andy said. He was wrong. I slept much worse, especially with Heather's hot body next to me. That was fine. I was a wuss when it came to Heather. With any other girl I dated, I was in control, but at the sight of her, my knees went weak and my brain turned to mush. A week later, after dinner, I broached the subject in what I thought was a roundabout way. Honey, can I ask you something? I said, starting our conversation. Sure, babe. Anything, she replied, snuggling up to me. Do you trust me? I mean, do you think I would ever do anything to hurt you? No, I hope not. Why do you ask? You haven't done anything stupid, have you? Now she sat up and looked at me. No, I didn't do anything. I was just thinking about us and our future, that's all. Honey, I think about us every day and how happy I am. You know I've worked hard to grow my business. I look at it as my nest egg, for our future. You work too hard, and your partners don't appreciate all you do for them, she replied, making it even harder for me to ask. We each have our own expertise, and we work together to get the job done. It's always been that way. But when we formed the company, we put in bylaws that will prevent anyone else from owning shares in the company. That way, only the three of us will own the company. What if one of you wants out or dies? Then the other two will buy the third person's share in the company, and it will stay with the original owners. Steve, what does that have to do with us? Well, I'm just getting to that, I said in a half-whisper as sweat began to roll down my neck and the sides of my face. You don't mind signing a prenup? Hesitantly, I said, expecting an explosion. So, you're asking me to marry you, right? And you want me to give up my rights to anything and everything so that when you get sick of me, you can toss me to the curb like a piece of trash. That's about as far as it goes. Heather rose from the bed, and even in the dim light of the room, I could see how flushed her face was. I had just started counting down from 5 when she exploded. You pathetic piece of shit! Who the hell do you think you are? Look, honey, let me explain, I tried to say before she shot up, stabbed me, and hung me from the ceiling fan. The last thing I saw was her walking out the door, which flew off its hinges when she slammed it shut. It wasn't a good thing. She disappeared for 3 days. I tried calling her at work, but she wouldn't take my calls. Thanks, guys, I said to my partners after the second day. Heather dumped me because I brought up that damn prenup, and now she won't even talk to me. Is there anything else you want me to tell her? I'm sure you two can think of a few more things to make her even more pissed off at me, if that's possible. Steve, I'm sorry, but how would you feel if she left you and you lost half of what you'd worked so hard to build? I probably knew they were right, but that didn't make it any easier. When I got home that night, she was already waiting for me. Do I look like some money-hungry bitch to you? You think I'm only with you because of your damn money? Do you think? She shouted accusingly. Baby, I'm sorry about the other night, and no, I don't think that. It's just, if we got together and it didn't work out, I started to say before she stopped me again. So it gives you everything and me nothing. Is that what you're asking? You can go out and be promiscuous and leave me out in the cold if I complain? Heather, I would never cheat on you. Oh, now I get it. You think I'm the one who's going to cheat. That's the thing. At least I'm glad I found out ahead of time what you really think of me. You really are a miserable worm, aren't you? With those words, she turned her back to me. Now I was getting angry. Okay, Miss High and Mighty, what do you want to include? I want to protect my business interests and everything I've built up to this point. But if you have something to offer, now is the time to speak up. She stopped and turned to him. How about you cheat on me? What if in 10 years you want to replace me with a newer model? What would happen then? Well, we can put something in the contract for that case, if you're afraid I'll do something like that. I hate it as much as you do, but if it's laid out in black and white, at least we'll know the consequences if one of us decides to go astray. In other words, you don't think it's going to work out? Is that what you're trying to tell me? Heather, that's not what I'm trying to say. I love you to death, and we may never need this, but it will cover both of us if it does. So if you cheat on me, I can have whatever I want? And the same goes for me if you cheat. She paused, and I could see the wheels turning in her head. I don't like it, but I understand the thinking behind it. It's like we're drawing up an impersonal prenup, Clause 4, Condition 3 and all that. Well, at least one good thing came out of it all, she winked at me. What the hell was that? I asked. Hey. At least I now know for sure that you want to marry me. And frowning, she smiled. Steve, I know you'll never try to trick me, at least outside of the bedroom. So if I have to sign some ridiculous prenup to get you forever, then so be it. Let's just get this over with, and we can go back to the way things were before you chickened out. I'm not chickening out, I said in a serious voice. Whatever you say, she grinned. Taking my hand, she led me back to our bedroom. We need to put the last 3 days behind us, and I only know one way to start the healing process. The next day, I was late for work. It took a few weeks to work out the exact wording. My business and home were off limits, but anything further was fair game. It came down to the fact that if we decided to split, it would be 60-40, with me getting 60% since I made the most money. However, if one of us cheated, the guilty party would get a maximum of $25,000, and the rest would go to the offending party. The most detailed was what was considered cheating. The definition covered not only the physical act, but also the emotional dishonoring and dishonoring of the other party. I expanded the definition to include the impact it could have on my business. All in all, it was detailed, thorough, and best of all, finalized. We both signed it. After the document was notarized, the attorney kept a copy and put a copy in our safe deposit box, and I hoped it would be forgotten. That night, we went out to dinner to celebrate. I felt like a huge weight had been lifted off my shoulders. I sat there and just stared at her, thinking about how much I loved her and how close I was to losing her. Happy? I asked. Very, she said, reaching for my hands. You know I love you, don't you? And you know I'm totally in love with you too? I replied as our eyes made love to each other. Let's skip dinner and go home. Not on your life, cowboy. I'm hungry and I need a big piece of meat tonight, she said, looking at me. And probably dinner too. What would you say if I asked you to marry me? You already proposed to me, don't you remember? I thought it was a settled matter now, after our talk about the marriage contract. But I never said those words. All right, Steve, let's hear them. She set down her wine glass and folded her arms. Here? Now? What could be better? At least I'll have a bunch of witnesses to the big event, she giggled nervously. I knew she was just teasing me, knowing I would never do that in a public place like a crowded restaurant. But this time she was wrong. I had been carrying that ring around with me for the past month, waiting for the right time to give it to her. I stood up, walked over to her, and lifted her to her feet. Steve, you're embarrassing me, she said, looking around because people were now looking in our direction. I got down on one knee and pulled the ring out of my vest pocket. Heather, I love you more than anything in the world. You make me happy, and I want to live my whole life with you. Will you honor me by becoming my wife? I said it loud enough for everyone around us to hear. There was dead silence in the hall. Everyone was looking at us. She looked at the ring and quietly mouthed, Yes. Yes, you crazy fool, I will marry you, she finally exclaimed loudly. The hall erupted in joyous shouts. The visitors clapped and congratulated us. That night, we made love like we had never made love before. Clasping me between her thighs and holding her arms above her head, we kissed forever. She responded to my every move, our lips and tongues never leaving each other. I felt her climax right after I started mine. We went down together, and in that moment I realized I had found my true soulmate. 4 months later, we had a small wedding, and 2 weeks after that, I found out she was pregnant with our firstborn. After Gary Michael was born, she quit her job and became a full-time homemaker, and when Casey came along, we were, as she put it, all in. One boy, one girl, and a house with a white picket fence. We had it all. Once a month, we had dinner with my partners and their wives. They were both getting married. Every quarter, we threw a party for all our clients. It wasn't a grand event, just dinner and drinks to thank them for their continued support. I think I started noticing it right after Gary was born, but never really paid much attention. But looking back, I think I should have. When she walked into a room, she wanted all eyes on her. She started dressing provocatively enough to make sure of it. It wasn't as noticeable at first, but then before Casey's pregnancy, she started to go overboard. After Casey was born, it stopped for a while because she spent an obscene amount of time dressing our daughter in the most revealing clothes she could find. She was my little angel, but to Heather, she was a doll that needed dressing up. It was at our quarterly meeting, just after our 6th anniversary, that we had our first serious fight. I was working in the hall with my partners, and Heather was working in the hall for a completely different reason. I don't think she was drunk, maybe only a little tipsy. However, she was too friendly with several of the men present. She had always loved to dance and was a great dancer, but what she was doing there was more than intrusive. The worst part was that I wasn't the first to notice it, but one of my partner Ann's wife. Steve, is Heather drunk? I don't think so. Why do you ask? She just turned me around and pointed to the dance floor. By the time the song ended, I was next to her. Grabbing her hand, I asked what the hell was she doing? Steve, I'm dancing with the son of your oldest client. He asked me if I wanted to dance, and I said yes. What's the problem? The problem is that I don't like my wife dancing with some guy on the dance floor. That's the problem. All the young guys are dancing like that nowadays. There's nothing wrong with it. It's a big deal to me, and you're not young anymore. You're a married woman with 2 kids. Steve, I may be a little older and have 2 kids, but I'm not dead yet, she replied. I'm not telling you not to have fun, but when the wife of one of my partners tells me you're having fun with some guy on the dance floor, it becomes my business. Think about what my other clients think. They're probably saying what a lucky bastard you are for having such a hot wife, she tried to say with a smile on her face. Not this group, Heather. They're old geezers who wouldn't say a word if they had a mouthful of shit. But know that they'll pull their contract from us in a heartbeat if they think there's any chance of some foul play affecting their business. Okay, I'll chill, but you really need to relax. It was a long drive home. We were arguing about how the wife of one of the owners should behave. I told her what I thought, and she just rolled her eyes. Things got worse after that. 2 months later, she showed up at a charity auction wearing a skirt that I thought was too short. I voiced my displeasure, and Heather said she wasn't going to change. Steve, if you don't like the way I'm dressed, just leave me at home and go on your own. You know I can't do that. They're expecting both of us. I relented, and off we went, much to my horror. She did her best to play the whole number that night, even though I tried to keep her at arm's length. We danced through more than half the songs, and when the slow one came on, she said, "Why don't we trash the place and go home?" I'd love to, but chill out for now. We have to stay for the auction anyway. This is a business dinner, not a pleasure party, I tried to explain to her. Heather was on her best behavior until the auction started. We won a few items that might come in handy for my work. We were about to leave when the auction started selling a date with one of the hot single guys. I let her out of my sight for less than 30 seconds to find her and another woman hot bidding for the guy. What the hell are you doing? Are you out of your mind? I shouted quietly to her through clenched teeth, struggling to put a smile on my face. Just raising the price, she replied. Now think about what you're doing if that's even possible. My married wife sets up a date with a single guy. Everyone in the room knows who we are, and it gives the impression that either I'm okay with it or you don't care about our marriage. Either way, you've embarrassed the hell out of me. So take your purse, smile sweetly at everyone, because we're getting out of here before you do any more damage to my reputation. Do you understand? You don't have to treat or talk to me like a child. Honey, if I don't, your brain won't understand what I'm saying. This was said with that silly smile that still flaunted on my face. Finally, we got out of the building. The car started exploding, and it was awesome. Steve, I'm not an idiot. I have an MBA and an accounting degree, she spat at me. Well, then use your brain at least once in a while. You know what they say? If you don't use it, you lose it, I hissed back. Keep it up, and I know something you won't be able to use for a hell of a long time. Is that supposed to be some kind of threat? Not a threat, but a promise. Venom burst from her lips. I was angry, she was angry, and we both weren't going to concede an inch. Needless to say, I got nothing that night, or the next, or even the night after that. I heard your wife almost bought a stud the other day, Andy said, trying to make a joke. Stuff for the office is one thing, but if she bought one, you'd have to pay that expense out of your own pocket. I could tell from his words that it didn't have the effect he was hoping for. Steve, it was a joke. It's not funny now, and it certainly wasn't funny last night. So if you don't mind, let's just drop the subject, okay? No problem, I was just thinking. I stopped him on the spot. Look, I have to deal with one person who doesn't think before saying or doing something stupid. I don't want to worry about you too. Let's just start working. Not a great start to a Monday morning. Fortunately, there weren't many people at work, and I could close the door and go about my business without anyone interrupting me. The atmosphere at home was chilly at best, and if it weren't for our two kids, I probably would have spent a lot less time there. We slept in the same bed, but there was a 10-foot-high barrier between us. God help us if we accidentally made contact. It was as if someone had hit us with a red-hot fireplace poker. Are you done sulking yet? Heather asked me after dinner Friday night. If not, I'm leaving. I've had enough of the frost from last Saturday night. You still don't get it, do you? Said I, looking at her. And I'm afraid you never will, I stated sadly, and shaking my head walked away. Talk to me, okay? Just don't walk away from me or I'll walk away. Was she trying to threaten me? Okay, suit yourself. I should have put her on a shorter leash. Maybe then I could have controlled her a little more. No, that would never work, at least not with her. I'm leaving. Don't wait up. She came out in a short black leather skirt that hid nothing and a white bustier with a slit up to her navel. When you leave, where should I send your stuff? I addressed her. She gave me a glare and walked out the door. I was about to get drunk to the point of passing out, but I decided not to. My marriage was dying, and not even slowly. She didn't seem to care anymore. Despite being a shitty wife, Heather was a great mom, and that was one of the only reasons I continued to overlook her lackadaisical attitude. She got home just before 1 o'clock in the morning. I pretended to be asleep. I wasn't in the mood to fight with her tonight. I heard the shower, the electric toothbrush, and finally saw the lights go out. She slipped into our bed, and instead of staying on her side, she moved next to me. I felt her hot body next to mine, and suddenly she started kissing my neck. I know you're awake. Do you want to fool around? I want you tonight. I rolled over and just stared at her, not saying a word for a minute. I guess you had to go and mess around with other guys to want me. Or do you want me to learn what sloppy seconds are? Either way, I lost my mood when you walked out the door tonight. I grabbed a pillow and fell asleep on the couch. Okay, I didn't sleep. I spent the night sitting on the couch. I was tired of flirting, dancing, and her pouncing on every guy who paid the slightest bit of attention to her. I was jealous to the point of insanity, but my possessive nature had gone away years ago. She was my wife, no one else's. She had married me, which meant she was mine and I was hers. I didn't trust her anymore, of course. If she acted like this when I was around, I couldn't even imagine how she acted when I wasn't around. The thought was too frightening, and I felt sad at the thought that I might soon be starting a new chapter in my life. Around 7 in the morning, I looked up and saw her. She was in her robe, leaning against the door jamb and crossing her arms in front of her. We need to talk. I didn't do anything with anyone last night. I had a few drinks, danced with a few guys, and came home, that's all. I didn't kiss anyone, let anyone fondle me, or go to bed with anyone. You have to believe me. I could see she was begging for help. Why should I believe you? I see how you act with our friends. I can't imagine what you do with strangers. I just don't want to fight about it anymore. You live your life, and I'll live mine. We'll meet occasionally at the center, and life will go on. That way I won't have to worry about you embarrassing me anymore. You're giving up on us? From our marriage, she shouted. What marriage? I've felt more like your overseer than your husband for too long. It's like a father trying to preserve his daughter's virginity. He does his best, but in the end it's up to the daughter to decide whether to keep it or give it away. You gave away our marriage. Steve, you're an asshole. I didn't give anything away. That's right. You didn't give it away. You made me pay over and over again with the self-respect and love I once had for you, but no more. I have nothing more to give. Ted, let's go upstairs and I'll make you feel good like I used to. You still can't hear me, can you? I've had enough. It's over. She got angry, said something under her breath, and walked away. I thought I could live together, but separate from her for the sake of our children. But I was wrong. She did everything she could to get me interested in her, and although my body almost betrayed me a couple times, my mind held firm. I never told her about the Sunday block party, but somehow she found out. I was looking forward to a nice quiet evening among old friends. It hadn't been easy the last few times, but tonight I wouldn't have to keep one eye on Heather and the other on the guests. Is your wife coming tonight? Asked Ken as we leaned against the bar. No, I haven't said a word to her about it. Well, I guess there won't be any excitement then, he joked, trying to lighten my mood, but he failed miserably. The party was in full swing, and we were just sitting down to dinner when I caught a glimpse of her. The dress was too low in the front and cut too high at the side. I almost didn't make it, honey, Heather said, kissing my cheek. She sat down on a vacant chair, squeezing it and herself between me and the man to my right. I looked at her, and she really did look amazing in her new dress. It showed off her body and really suited her. Linda told me about the party, and you must have slipped your mind. She looked at me. She whispered softly, You don't want anyone to think there's trouble in paradise, do you? She smiled at the couple across the table from us. I thought your wife wasn't coming, reminded Andy. You can thank your wife for being here, I told him in disgust. Hey, it's not her fault you can't control your wife. I wanted to strangle him right then and there, and I think he realized it as soon as he opened his mouth. Maybe she'll act normal tonight, trying to make it up to me. Heather worked the room as most of the guys tried their best to look like they weren't looking down at her, but of course they were. When the band started playing, she calmly walked over and asked me to dance. Why are you here? Haven't you done enough? Steve, you have two options. We can be the loving couple we really are, or I can be the biggest bitch to ever walk this earth, your choice. You really are a bitch, aren't you? You think you can blackmail me into loving you again? You don't respect me and probably never have, but I'm not going to put up with this farce anymore. I stepped away from her. I walked over to Linda first, thanking her for telling Heather about the party, and then to the bartender. He handed me my drink and I slipped him $100 bill and told him what I wanted him to do. He smiled. I didn't. I went back to my seat. Heather was remarkably good that night. She sucked up drinks like water and flirted with every guy, single or not. When she found herself on the dance floor with our client's brother, things took a turn for the worse. She wasn't just dancing with him, They were having fun in front of everyone else. Several couples left, already knowing what was going to happen, but apparently not wanting to be around when things went to shit. David, if your brother doesn't keep his hands off my wife right now, he's going to be seeing the hospital room from the inside for a long time. Do I make myself clear? He looked at me and realized I wasn't kidding. Phil, we're leaving, and right now, David said to his brother, and they both looked at me. Phil looked at Heather. He seemed to be thanking her for the dance, and without another word, they both left. That was the end of the party, I'd say on a low note. Ken, Andy, ladies, I'm leaving, I told them. I'll probably be out of work tomorrow, and probably the day after that too. Looks like I have some personal business to take care of, I told them. Steve, maybe if you talk to her, Linda said before I cut her off. If Andy saw you acting like this, what would he do? She didn't have a good answer to that question. I walked over to the bartender and he handed me the company camera. I gave him another 50 and headed home. Home. I have no idea what time Heather got home because I didn't hear her. I found her asleep on the living room couch on my way out the door. First, I stopped by the bank and emptied our safety deposit box. Then I went to the lawyer and got the cell and our prenup. I told him I wanted to leave and not be gentle. I spent the next couple hours on the computer, rearranging things and changing the location of stocks, bonds, and bank accounts. Credit cards were canceled, reopened in my name only, and I went so far as to notify my children's school via email that I was in the process of divorce so she couldn't take my children and run away. I made sure my attorney prepared an order signed by a judge stating that I was to be notified if Heather came to the school to try to take the kids. Where have you been all day? I called your work and they told me you took the day off, said Heather, watching my reaction to her words. I'm really sorry about last night. I guess the anger and alcohol must have made me look like a complete ass. I apologized to Ken, Andy, and their wives and was waiting for you to get home so I could talk to you. You don't have to. Like I told you before, I'm done with you. If I wanted to marry a whore, I'd pick a better one than you. At least with a whore, I would have known what position I was in. And with you, I never realized anything until last night. I had my suspicions, but I never knew what a conniving bitch you could be. Thanks for finally putting it all out in the open. Steve, that's not what you meant. I'm sorry, we can get past this, I know. I just shook my head. Here's a check for $10,000 for legal advice. You'll be handed it in on Thursday, and you'll know that all of our old accounts and credit cards are now closed. You can stay in the house, just stay away from me. According to our prenup, we will share custody of the kids, and since I had this house before I met you, they will stay here, at least for now. Let's try to make this as civilized as possible, if not better than our kids. Don't even think you can take them and leave. I have a signed court order that says I must be notified immediately if you try to take the kids out of school for any reason. When you get a lawyer, I will send him a copy of our prenup. I wish I could say this is just business, but it's not. It's personal to me now. So if you'll excuse me, I have to tell our children that we're getting divorced and make it as easy as possible for them. I stepped away from a stunned Heather. She had hired a good lawyer, thinking she would get a lot of money from me. When he saw the agreement, the testimonies of people at various parties, and the tape of her demonstration at the Sunday party he came to see her meet Jesus, she was not happy. The divorce was an easy decision, and since everything was spelled out, it went pretty quickly. I don't know if she hated me to the core, but she must have because my lawyer was tough. Heather ended up in a one-bedroom apartment with her jewelry, clothes, car, and a bunch of change that wouldn't last forever. I let her see the kids in the house, but made sure I was always around. She eventually found a part-time accounting job and, I realized, was freelancing part-time. For the next 3 months, I felt pretty good. My kids were with me because Heather couldn't afford to support them. She saw them a couple times a week. She was even allowed to visit them on weekends at her apartment. I tried to stay out of her way when she went to pick them up. I didn't have to see her unless I wanted to, and I didn't want to. I didn't go on dates if for no other reason. We were busy and starting to hit our stride. And then it dawned on me. No, I'm not putting up with this, I yelled to the two of them. Why the hell would I put up with something like that? You know what she's like. Look, Anne says she needs the money after your divorce, and this way we don't have to worry about anything or do anything for our meetings. She'll organize everything, send out the invitations, take care of the food and drinks. All we'll have to do is just show up there and enjoy ourselves. Come on, it'll be a win-win situation. I objected, but I was supported. I wasn't going to go, but it wouldn't be right from a business standpoint. So I relented and went. Good evening, Steve. Heather, I nodded, confirming her words. I've got everything under control. Enjoy yourself and pretend I'm not here. Yeah, right? Looks like I was wrong. Everything went great, and it was probably the best party we've ever thrown. That's what our clients told us. We got new business, and Ken and Andy were sure it was because of the party. We need to hold them every 2 months and open it up to potential clients. We can have a meeting room, they tried to assure me. That way, we can get even more business. I was against it, but they changed my mind the second time. I didn't like where this was going. So the parties under Heather's leadership continued and got bigger and bigger. She became the hostess and now interacted openly with our guests. She became more than friendly with a few of our clients, and if I didn't know better, I would have sworn there was something going on behind the scenes. When Heather started inviting women over to hand out treats, I got a twitch. They looked and acted like highly paid call girls. When one or two started disappearing with the customers upstairs, I tried to put a stop to it. Guys, are we running a brothel? You might get a client or two, but our old clients aren't going to stick around and wait for something to happen. They need to think about their reputations. Steve, we're getting more business than we can handle. Calm down and go with the flow, Ken told me, looking at one of the girls. You guys can stay here if you want, but I'm out of here. I want no part of this. I was about to leave the room when Heather came up to me. You're leaving so early, the party's just starting. Did you really love me, or was it all one big pretense on your part? I loved you, but you got so damn boring. I was like a wild horse that wanted to run, and you kept trying to keep me in the barn. For your information, I never cheated on you until that night. I guess I thought you were my white knight and would fight for me, but you never did. Well, really, why on earth would I fight for someone who goes out of his way to act like a tramp and embarrass me? You seem to be giving our clients more than you've given me in the last 6 months of our marriage. When I pay for a prostitute, I expect her to act like a prostitute. I left her with my mouth open and my pride intact. After that night, I stopped going to our company parties. Mr. Collins, I said, getting up from the table and pulling out a chair for him. I wasn't expecting you until tomorrow. Steve, I never like waiting to give someone bad news. I changed my schedule so we can meet this morning. Have a seat and let's talk. Can I get you something to eat or drink? I asked. Nothing, thanks. I won't be here long, he said, crossing his legs. Steve, I like you, and it pains me to tell you that I am terminating my association with your firm. The 7 of us don't really like the direction your company is going, and we can't afford to be around if and when something happens. I don't understand. Is it something we've done? And if it is, give us a chance to correct the mistake, I pleaded with him. Steve, I've always liked you, and you've never misled me, but your 2 partners are leading your firm down a shaky path. May I ask you a personal question? Sure, please ask, I replied. I haven't seen you at the last few parties. May I ask why you weren't there? That's kind of a personal question. You mean because your ex-wife is selling prostitutes to your new clients? Steve, one of them had the nerve to ask me if I wanted to go upstairs. Like I said, we don't like the direction your company is going, and we're looking at other options. Think faster! My brain screamed loudly. How about I guarantee you that in less than 30 days, our company will turn 180 degrees? What if I told you that if I didn't, I'd start my own firm? Look, it's only 30 days, and if I'm wrong, what do you have to lose? Give me a month to prove it to you. I could see the wheels turning in his head. Okay, 30 days and not a day more. In 30 days, I will be here again to either shake your hand or withdraw my business. Agreed? Thank you, I can promise you won't be disappointed. I knew I had to fix this hellish situation, and fast. Andy and Ken, as usual, showed up late. Guys, we have a big problem. Some of our customers want to fold their business. One of them was molested by my ex-wife's hostesses at your last party. He was with his wife for goodness sake. I told them we'll set things up, but we only have 30 days to do it. I need your help. What was that phrase? Deaf, dumb, blind, and stupid? That's exactly what they were. They liked the parties the way they were, and if a few old guys didn't like it, fine. Look, Steve, we have contracts with all of them. They can't just up and leave without charging us a huge termination fee, and they're not going to do that. You worry too much, they told me. To hell with them, I thought. I'm not giving up without a fight. I picked up the phone. Sanda, I made the appointment for lunch instead of dinner because I didn't want anyone to know about it. I'm glad you both could join me, I said to Anne and Linda. Why are you being so secretive, Steve? Asked Anne. Or should I say we have a big problem. I then recounted my meeting with Mr. Collins and my conversation with their husbands yesterday. I'll leave on my own if I have to. I worked too hard to build this business to see it go down the drain because of an ex-wife and a few prostitutes. What prostitutes? Said Anne, straightening up in her seat. Haven't you been to any parties in the last 6 months? All those women handing out drinks and food are call girls hired by Heather. She told us they're former models, Linda added. They take potential clients upstairs and give them a little incentive to sign a contract. Our husbands would never go for that? They both insisted. Are you planning on going to the party on Saturday? I asked. Not really. They've become more like frat parties than business meetings, Anne said, looking at Linda for agreement. Now for a really personal question. When you both signed the prenuptial agreements, were they the same as Heather and me? Steve, after we saw what Heather signed, we told our husbands that there was no way in hell we would sign such a contract, and we didn't. I was stunned. You didn't sign anything? Just the marriage certificate, Linda replied with a smile. My thoughts were racing at 1,000,000 miles an hour. Can we meet Sunday at my house, say 10:30? Why? Asked Anne. I want to show you what really happens at these parties. I have a friend who will film what goes on, and we can watch it together. Steve, that's kind of tacky, isn't it? Said Anne, feeling a little awkward. Look, the point of the game is, do you trust your husbands? I just want to put an end to what I think is going on, that's all. Forgive me if I don't seem overly compassionate or concerned for Andy or Ken. This is about my earnings, and I assume your earnings. I'm going to do this with or without your consent. I just want you both to know about it in advance. You can warn your husbands or leave it alone. It's your choice. Steve, you're not going out alone, are you? Asked Linda, looking more than concerned. I wouldn't want to, but if I have to, I will. Why don't we postpone the decision until Sunday? Maybe they'd have a change of heart after I talk to them, and if not, well, fine. None of us ate much at lunch. Since our company was paying for the rooms, the hotel had no problem letting my man in early Saturday morning. I told him I wanted pictures and sound in the dining room and both guest rooms. John, when everyone leaves Saturday night, I want you to get all the cameras out and bring me the CDs. I don't want any evidence left behind that might come back to haunt me, understand? At least now I could confirm what I had heard or prove my clients wrong, but I didn't think so. John brought everything he needed just after 2 o'clock the next morning. The camera, discs, and microphones were all in place. With a check for $700 in his pocket, he left, and I went to bed. I was going to look at one of the discs, but decided I'd better get a good night's sleep because there was no telling what would happen next. Anne and Linda drove to my house together. They had a bag of donuts and coffee from Starbucks. I didn't seem to need to make breakfast. Have you watched the CD yet? Asked Anne, pouring herself a cup of coffee and taking a donut. No, but I already put it in the DVD player. Well, let's see what we've got then, Linda muttered, finishing the last donut. It had started out pretty darn humble. Maybe I was wrong, I told them both. Then I saw Heather look around and walk out of the room. I switched to another DVD and saw her walk into one of the adjoining rooms. We watched 4 or 5 customers being served. We fast-forwarded through 90% of the action, and I figured Ken was the only asshole until Andy walked into one of the rooms with one of the women. "Steve, I'm so sorry," she said, standing up and strutting back and forth. "At least he didn't swat me." And to think we felt sorry for her enough to make our husbands hire her to organize these parties. Again, we're sorry about that, Steve. There was a lot of sorry here. No problem, you didn't know, and to tell you the truth, I didn't know either. But now I do know. If you have no desire to watch any further, I'd like to turn this garbage off. I hit the stop button. "That bastard will be dead when I get home," Anne muttered. "I don't even want to see mine," Linda yelled. "I'm going to call and tell him to take his shit and get out." I let them go on for a few more minutes before I spoke. "Ladies," I said, as the 2 angry women looked in my direction. "Like it or not, we still need them." "For what?" shouted Anne in response. "For their jobs. They're both very good at what they do when they're on the job. Right now, if the company is to survive, we're going to need their help." Both women sat down, but were far from calm. "I have a suggestion for you both that will allow you to get back at your husbands and keep the company intact." I captured their attention. For the next 2 hours, I laid out my plan. They didn't like everything, but they agreed with most of my suggestions. I called our company lawyer, and 3 hours later, the agreement was signed, sealed, and notarized. "Please don't freak out until the paperwork is filed with the court on Monday morning," I pleaded with them. "You'll have the upper hand by Tuesday, and I don't care what you do after that." And I really didn't care. My former best friends bullied me, especially Ken, and they would get theirs one way or another. Monday was typical. We had a lot to catch up on. After the morning meeting, I went into my office, closed the door, and called my ex-wife. "Heather, I need to meet you at the house tonight. The kids will be at my mom's, so no one will bother us." "Steve, do you want me to wear something special?" she asked. "No, wear whatever you want." "You dog. I knew you couldn't stay away from me. I'll be there by 7, honey." I probably shouldn't have played along, but I just couldn't help myself. She was the mother of my 2 children, but thank God, no longer my wife. I left the front door open, and just before 7, she walked in wearing a long coat. I handed her a glass of wine and raised our glasses. "To a once great marriage," I said, setting down my glass, watched by a puzzled Heather. "Please have a seat, because you're going to want to hear what I'm about to tell you." "Steve, we can talk later. Right now, we're going to need all of our energy to reconnect with each other." "You told Ken that too? And the other 2 guys from the party last Saturday?" said I, turning on the DVD player. I rewound it to the part where she and Ken were doing it, and turned the volume up really high. "Turn it off! Please turn it off!" she yelled through the tape. It was a stupid mistake. He told me that if I didn't sleep with him, he'd turn me off. I had no choice. "And the other 2 guys?" She didn't have an answer for that. "The parties ended last Saturday. No more parties, no more fun, no more Ken and Andy." "But they still owe me for Saturday." I pulled a wad of cash out of my pocket. "I'm guessing $300 a trick. That should be enough for you and the other whores." I held out the money to her. "If I was a real asshole, I'd turn this tape over to the authorities. But you're still the mother of our kids, and I'm not taking them to jail to see you." "Steve, I'm sorry, but I needed the money to live." Ta-da-da. "I guess you're going to have to find another way to make money other than on your back. Unless, of course, you want to do it yourself, because I'm not going to pay you for it with money from my company anymore. The wrath of God will come upon Andy and Ken tomorrow, and it won't be pretty. I suggest you get out of town for a couple weeks. Maybe you can visit your mother out of state until things settle down. I can't and won't forbid you from seeing your children, and I won't tell them what a whore you've become. That's between you and your conscience. However, until you reform, you can only see them in this house. You can't take them anywhere by yourself, and no overnight visits. Is that clear?" "I never had anyone when I had the kids. How stupid do you think I am?" I just stared at her. "I'm just sorry it ended this way. I thought we had a pretty good marriage. But apparently you wanted more than I was willing to give. For a minute, I thought she was going to beg us again to try again, and if I hadn't seen the tape, I might have considered it. But not now. Hell, there was no way I was going back to her. We talked, made plans for the future, and after an hour she left. She kissed me on the cheek and told me that if I ever needed stress relief, to call her. That didn't happen while I had two beautiful hands. Anne divorced Ken and Linda, for whatever reason decided to try to patch things up with Andy, although I still wouldn't want to be in his shoes. You see, each of the ladies received 50% of the stock in our company owned by their husbands. With these shares, Linda, Ann, and I now had a controlling interest in the company. Andy and Ken were told that they could keep their jobs, but going forward, they would only be paid for what they did for the company. They were not happy about this, but something about alimony payments and a possible impending divorce kept them working. We made the necessary changes to bring our company back to respectability, and although we lost a few accounts, we maintained a stable client base. It is now just Linda, Ann, and myself attending the monthly meetings. Next year, we want to expand our staff and add a few new graphic designers, but that will be our decision. I see Heather once every 2 weeks and have no idea what's going on in her life, nor do I care anymore. I get a lot of hits on my profile and have even dated a few of them. One girl caught my eye. Her name is Kikyo and she lives in Japan. She is a single mom and is planning a trip to the United States next month. We video chatted via computer and she seemed nice enough, but was concerned about what she had heard about Americans being disrespectful and asked me directly why my wife and I had separated. When I told her about it, she smiled and said she was looking forward to meeting me. Could she be the one? Only time will tell. But as I said at the beginning, I enjoyed being in love and will remarry someday. I just hope she doesn't have the hassle of signing a prenup like Heather did. I'm not going to take any chances, and neither are Anne or Linda. The end. Thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed it. So subscribe to my channel and watch the next video.